This video will discuss how to use a course map to help identify, practice learning activities and assessments and content for your course that support your learning objectives. So let's remember that when you make a course map, the first thing you do is you identify the overall skill set that you want your students to be able to demonstrate at the end of the course. And then you write measurable objectives using Bloom's taxonomy and action verbs. I have done that in this particular example for the Physics 151 online course. I have 8 course objectives, and I have them listed here in this chart. And I have numbered them CO1, CO2, CO3, CO4. Then I subdivided my course into 8 units of material, 8 modules. And for each module, I carefully considered the skills that students would need to be able to demonstrate to me that would allow me to structure and scaffold their learning such that they will be able to succeed and demonstrate the ultimate course objective. So as I wrote those, you'll see that I numbered them as well. I came up with a numbering system, M 1.1, 1.2 for Module 1, M 2.1, 2.2 for Module 2, and so forth. And beside each of those module objectives, I wrote the specific course objective that particular little small objective supported. So let's do an example here. In Module 2, which is the first time that they really start looking at motion in my class, I have 8 module objectives. So module Objective 2.8 is correctly use the video analysis tools in Pivot Interactives to create position time and velocity time graphs to analyze the motion of objects. And that corresponds to Course Objective 2 and Course Objective 7. So Course Objective 2 says, relate the concepts underlying measurement in physics, kinematics, vectors, and the laws of motions to everyday experiences. And Module 6 says, collect and analyze data related to the concepts listed in CO1 through CO5. So this way the students know that if I put this course map in my course, they know specifically that doing these things, these particular skill sets, achieving them and doing well at them will help them to be successful in the overall course. The next step is to pick content, learning activities, and assessments that support the module objectives. So when I went to pick my module content in the last column here, I really wanted to make sure that I offered a variety of different media because different learners like to learn in different formats. And I also wanted to make sure that all of the module objectives were covered in what I was providing them. So I have a mixture of videos and online textbooks. For example, I have OpenStax kinematics videos that correspond directly. They were made for the specific textbook that my students are using. I have Khan Academy videos. I have links to a really good source. It's actually at a upper level high school level, but it breaks it down at a little bit lower level than OpenStax does. It's called Physics Classroom. And then I also created in something called OpenStax Tutor a reading activity. It's kind of like a guided study activity where they go through each section of OpenStax and they answer questions. And they're multiple choice questions, so they get feedback on whether or not they understand the material as they go. And it also redirects them to where they can find the answers in the book. And finally, they have to enroll in their Pivot Interactive activity, and they have to watch the teacher-made how to use Pivot video so that they'll learn, start being oriented to, using the video analysis tools in it. So I've given them lots of different things. And the other thing that I did is I made sure that all of these sources were accessible, that they met the guidelines for content on the web. And so I wanted to make sure that they did that. I didn't want my students to have any kind of disadvantage on if they need a screen reader, if they need any kind of assistive technology, even if it's somebody who, you could have somebody that has a neurological problem that cannot use a mouse, has to use a keyboard. So I wanted to make sure that these resources were accessible to everybody. You'll notice that I also wrote down the module objectives that they supported, just to reinforce that idea that everything you pick has to support what you want your students to be able to do. Finally, it came down to figuring out what kinds of things I wanted to use for grades and practice. So I found some multimedia things for them to use to practice. And one of them I created myself, were these spin the wheel practice things. I created it myself because I knew how to do that. But you can find different kinds of flashcard activities, Kahoot games, things like that you can put into your class, where these are just self-assessments. So I have self-assessments for several of the specific modules. And I also have that OpenStax Tutor reading questions, which addresses every single one of the module objectives. And then for a graded work, for assessments, where they're going to demonstrate to me exactly what they know, I created a homework worksheet, and they have a discussion forum where they actually complete a pivot activity, and they discuss the problems that they were having using it. They discuss also not only any problems or challenges they may have, but they also discuss in small groups data analysis, and they compare the results to each other. And this allows me a chance to give them some really good constructive feedback in a smaller venue. And then finally, they also complete a lab in Pivot on their own, and that covers specific objectives as well. If you go to my course in Blackboard, you'll see that I made this very clear. I've included the course map under course resources for my students right below the syllabus. And I've explained this numbering system that I use. But when I create my course, I actually do list the module objectives as they are in the course map with the course objectives they support. And in my assignment overview, in my graded assignments, I do the same thing, because I want my students to know that these practice things that they have, or content review things, they actually mean something. And if you can go through this, you can go through these different activities, then you will have engaged with content and practiced the content that relates directly to the module objectives, and you will be much more likely to be successful. And then, of course, I also noted what module objectives I was measuring in the graded assignments. So that's basically what I do when I pick content. I try to keep it accessible. I try to make sure that I address every single learning objective, and that I don't have just extraneous assignments out there that don't really relate to anything. And I try to make it very clear to the student why they are doing what they are doing, and that this is really meant to help support them. And I start that from the very first day.